What if I told you that the grandest and most luxurious houses of the Gilded Age were built with secret walls, hidden doors, and a whole invisible architecture? These huge mansions where high society life was in full swing were actually divided into two completely different worlds.
You must tell us how you managed to acquire the deed.
It involved a rather spirited chase through the lower provinces.
One was a world of shining gold, crystal and silk, accessible only to the select few, and the other was a labyrinth of narrow staircases, dark corridors, and cramped rooms, hidden from the eyes of the owners and guests. Inside each of these golden cages was a second home for the servants, and it was there that the real drama unfolded. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why the mistresses of these houses often felt more unhappy and restricted than the servants who served their luxurious lifestyle every day. What if I showed you a time machine that would transport you to the invisible underbelly of New York's luxurious mansions? In order for the outward life of the wealthiest families of the Gilded Age to appear perfect and effortless, a complex, invisible system worked behind the walls. This system required the complete isolation of the master's world from that of their servants, and this was achieved through ingenious architecture that was deliberately concealed. The mansion was like two houses inserted into each other, where one world was never to intersect with the other. The main element of this invisible architecture was the service or black staircases, which became the arteries for the silent movement of the servants. These staircases were narrow, steep, and often located deep within the walls or behind ordinary doors, next to the kitchen or the back entrance. They allowed maids and footmen to move between floors without being seen by guests, disturbing the peace, or dirtying the carpets intended for the owners. The steps themselves were made of simple wood and had no beautiful railings because their function was purely practical and hidden. Another key element was the black corridors, narrow, dimly lit passageways that duplicated the main corridors of the house. These corridors allowed the servants to deliver food, laundry, coal for the fireplaces, or clear away dishes. They were always laid out at the back of the rooms and had separate, often inconspicuous doors to the bedrooms and living rooms so that the staff could enter and exit like ghosts. From the outside, such a door could look like part of a panel, a built-in wardrobe, or a mirror to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the expensive interior. The system of bells and speaking tubes was another technological secret that controlled the lives of servants. Bell buttons were located in every salon and bedroom, and pressing them sent a signal to a special servant's room, indicating where the call came from. This allowed the owners not to raise their voices or engage in direct communication, maintaining distance and demonstrating their superiority over the servants. This system was the nerve center of the house, dictating to each maid and butler where and how quickly they needed to move. It is interesting to see how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you watching us from? What interested you most about this invisible device in mansions? Share your opinion in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel to learn more about the hidden side of great eras. Are you ready for the shocking truth that the status of a mansion's mistress was often more burdensome than the work of the servants? The outward luxury of the mansion was only a facade, behind which lay a complex hierarchy that affected not only the servants, but also the mistress herself. In the Gilded Age, the life of a noble lady was completely regulated by social rules and expectations that turned her into an expensive but unfree decoration of the house. While the servants worked, the mistress herself had to conform. Her life was an endless cycle of duties that she could not break. The main role of the hostess was to maintain the reputation and status of the family, which required daily and impeccable observance of all social rituals. She had to manage a complex staff of servants, organize receptions, conduct correspondence, and make visits, with her every move carefully discussed and evaluated by society. Her life was a public performance, where her dress, manners, choice of dishes, and even her facial expressions had to be perfect. This constant need to be on display and live up to expectations was exhausting. Within this hierarchy, the lady of the house often felt lonely and isolated. Her marriage was usually a union of capital and family names rather than love, and her husbands were often busy with business, politics, and their own pleasures. She could not afford to show weakness, public anger, or express personal feelings that could jeopardize the family's reputation. Therefore, she was confined to a gilded cage, where her luxurious bedrooms and salons became the scene of her silent inner tragedy. Her personal space was illusory. Even in her bedroom, she was surrounded by the invisible presence of maids who took care of her clothes, brought her morning tea, and prepared her for going out. There was no privacy, no real solitude in the house, as her entire life was under the watchful, albeit silent, eye of the staff. She could not even light the fireplace or pour herself a glass of water on her own, because that would be demeaning to her status, which meant she was dependent on the services of others. The contrast between luxury and lack of freedom was enormous. While the maid, having completed her duties, could retreat to the attic, the mistress had to continue her work, receiving guests, smiling at the ball, or sitting at dinner with a man she did not love. Her work was emotional, requiring the suppression of all personal desires and feelings in order to maintain outward appearances. This silent sacrifice concealed the true price of her high position, which society did not see or recognize. Unlike the mistress, the servants, although they worked hard, enjoyed a certain freedom that was unavailable to the lady. They had no reputation to protect and could interact with each other without strict rules. Are you ready to find out what this limited but still lively and human interaction behind closed doors really looked like? You've definitely never heard of this unique secret. In a house where silence and invisibility reigned, the only loud and constantly sounding element was the service bell. It was not just a device, but a real dictator that controlled the rhythm of life for all the servants. This bell was the secret of power in the house, belonging neither to the owners nor to the servants, but to the system itself. It was the voice of the mansion. The system was designed in such a way that it was supervised by the butler or the head maid, who sat in a special room for the servants. This room, often small and windowless, was filled with rows of small plates bearing numbers or room names. When the master pressed a button, the corresponding plate swung open and a piercing bell rang. It was a signal that could not be ignored. The bell was always a demand for immediate attention. No matter what the maid was doing, resting, eating, or cleaning silver, she had to drop everything and rush to the call.
The bell rings again in the hallway, echoing through the mansion's walls.
A delay of a few seconds could be perceived as laziness or disrespect, which was unacceptable. The servant had to literally guess what the master would need in the next minute. This constant readiness and tension were no less exhausting than physical labor. The sound of the bell itself became a source of constant stress. The servants said that even in their free time, this metallic, demanding sound continued to ring in their ears. It penetrated their dreams and became a symbol of their complete dependence on the will of those who lived upstairs. It was this sound that blurred the line between personal time and work time, because work could begin at any moment. Thus, the bell was not just a mechanism, but a symbol of the comprehensive power of the owners, which penetrated the most remote corners of the house and the souls of the servants. It constantly reminded them that they existed only to serve the lives of others, and that their own time and desires meant nothing. The secret of its power lay in its absolute unpredictability and demanding nature. If you like this look at the underside of luxury, please like this video. What you are about to learn will change your perception of luxury in the Gilded Age. The outward splendor of mansions required enormous, invisible effort, and its price was measured in tons of coal, gallons of steam, and clouds of dust. The life of a servant was a cycle of endless, hard physical labor, aimed at maintaining perfect, sterile cleanliness. It was in this endless labor that the mechanics of luxurious living were hidden. The dirtiest and most physically demanding work was maintaining coal-fired fireplaces and stoves. Every mansion had dozens of fireplaces that had to be lit, cleaned of ashes, and maintained throughout the day, especially in winter. Every maid and footman had to carry buckets of coal and ashes up narrow black staircases, often several times a day. Coal dust was everywhere, and this black mark was inextricably linked to the shine of gold and silver. Cleaning was thorough and daily. Carpets, furniture, draperies, all of this required constant cleaning, polishing, and beating. Imagine dozens of meters of silk, velvet, and tapestries that could not simply be vacuumed. This was done by hand using brushes, damp cloths, and special cleaning products. Maids who knew how to clean the finest lace and delicate fabrics without damaging them, using special solutions and their own patience, were especially valued. Silver and porcelain were a particular headache for the servants. Hundreds of silver cutlery items were used at every ball and dinner party, which not only had to be washed, but also polished to a shine. Polishing silver was a long and tedious task that required the maid to be diligent and attentive to detail. Even the slightest tarnish could provoke the wrath of the mistress. The kitchens were filled with steam and heat. While the upper floors enjoyed the coolness, the basement kitchens were hellish places. Huge stoves burned there, food was prepared for dozens of people, and dishes were washed. The laundry room, if there was one in the house, was another source of heat and humidity. It was a world completely opposite to the light and airy atmosphere of the ballrooms. The standards of cleanliness were not only high, but also completely illogical. For example, a maid who cleaned the bedroom was forbidden from cleaning the living room to avoid the possible transfer of dust or odors. Each servant had their own specific area of work, which they were not allowed to leave. These strict regulations made the work even more monotonous and exhausting. But even the most cunning trail is useless if your pursuers have water. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Apaches turned the main source of life in the desert into a deadly weapon. Ready to learn more? What if I told you that one of the tools of warfare was water? The kitchen was the busiest, noisiest, and dirtiest place in the mansion, but it was also the most closed off and guarded from prying eyes. It was a place of alchemy, where raw ingredients were transformed into exquisite dishes, and where a completely separate hierarchy flourished. Located in the basement, the kitchen was completely isolated from the rest of the house. The food delivery route itself was planned like a secret operation. Raw ingredients were delivered through the back entrance or basement door so as not to contaminate the front entrance and avoid being seen by guests. They were received by the cook or storekeeper, who were among the most important and highly paid servants. The food was then stored in special pantries, which were often cold and poorly lit. Cooking was a physically demanding and time-consuming process. Huge ovens were heated with coal, and most of the work of cutting, slicing, and kneading was done by hand. The cook and his assistants worked 16 hours a day, often in unbearable heat. The cook was a real despot in his world, and his word was law for everyone who worked in the kitchen. One of the invisible but important aspects was waste and its disposal. Houses did not have modern waste disposal systems. All waste, from food scraps to ashes, had to be removed through the back door and taken away. It was a dirty, unpleasant job that often fell to the lowest-ranking servants, and it was yet another reminder of the contrast between the facade and the reality of life. A black economy thrived among the servants in the kitchen. Small amounts of food, alcohol, or leftovers could be discreetly hidden and consumed by the servants. Sometimes, with the cook's permission, leftovers were sold or exchanged. These tiny acts of theft or exchange were a means of survival and compensation for hard work and low pay. Thus, the kitchen was not just a place for preparing food, but a closed laboratory where people worked in complete isolation from the world they served. It was the boundary between hunger and luxury, between harsh reality and refined art. When the Apaches did decide to go into battle, they chose the ideal conditions for it. When a ball or a dinner party began in a mansion of the Gilded Age, the role of the servants became critically important. Their task was to become an absolute shadow, an invisible force that ensured the smooth running of the entire event. Their etiquette of invisibility was as complex as the rules governing the behavior of hosts and guests. Before the reception began, the servants had to spend hours preparing the house, polishing the floors, rubbing the silver, lighting hundreds of candles and lamps. All this required not only physical strength, but also precision. Every item had to be in its place so that guests would have the impression that everything had appeared by itself, as if by magic. During the reception itself, the servants had to move along invisible paths. They moved along the walls using black corridors and staircases to avoid being the center of attention. Trays of champagne and dishes had to appear out of nowhere and disappear as if by magic. Any collision, loud noise, or awkward movement was considered a failure. To the guests, the servants were faceless figures, part of the decor, not worthy of attention or even a glance. They were often referred to by their job titles: butler, maid, rather than by name. This was part of an unspoken etiquette aimed at maintaining social distance. Such depersonalization helped hosts and guests ignore the human cost of luxury. However, despite their invisibility, the servants saw and heard absolutely everything. They were silent witnesses to all the gossip, intrigue, quarrels, and flirting that took place between the hosts and their guests. They knew who was dating whom, who owed money to whom, and who was unhappy in their marriage. This hidden information was their only weapon and the subject of their quiet conversations in the service rooms. The etiquette of service itself required them to have perfect memory and attention. They had to remember who drank and ate what and serve it without asking questions. For example, the butler had to know that a certain guest always drank whiskey on the rocks, and the hostess preferred a certain champagne. This observant nature was their professional skill. The ambush was effective, but how did the Apaches sustain themselves during long campaigns away from home? In the next chapter, we will discuss their unique system of logistics and survival. The success of the Apache military operations would have been impossible without their unique logistics system. The life of the servants was not chaotic, but strictly regulated. In the attics and basements of mansions, there was a strict hierarchy that was as important as the social status of the owners. This world was completely isolated, but within it, there were its own unwritten rules and laws. At the top of this hierarchy stood the butler for the men and the senior maid, housekeeper, for the women. They were the intermediaries between the owners and the rest of the servants, and their power was absolute. They hired and fired staff, assigned duties, kept order, and reported to the owners. Their position was prestigious, but also very responsible. Below them were skilled servants, such as cooks, footmen, and personal maids. The personal maid was perhaps the most privileged of the female servants. She was allowed into the mistress's private space, knew all her secrets, and could receive old clothes or small gifts. However, her work was very demanding and required her to be constantly at the lady's side. At the bottom of the hierarchy were junior maids, maids of the chamber, and errand boys. Their work was the dirtiest and hardest, cleaning shoes, cleaning fireplaces, washing floors, and lifting heavy objects. They worked the longest hours, earned the least, and were the subject of ridicule or orders from the senior servants. Their careers could only advance through years of impeccable service. Thus, the world of servants was a complex, functioning system where everyone knew their place and their duties. Despite the hard work, this world gave them a sense of belonging and community that the lonely masters in their huge, cold houses did not have. Secrets and unspoken dramas were the basis of emotional life in the mansion during the Gilded Age, and it was the servants who were their silent guardians. They knew what was really going on behind closed doors, and this awareness gave them a unique, albeit implicit power. Their whole lives were steeped in other people's secrets. The most common drama was unhappy marriages. Many marriages were arranged, and the servants witnessed cold, distant relationships between spouses, their quarrels, or complete disregard for each other. They saw the mistress crying in her bedroom and the master returning late at night. This information they kept was a moral burden. Another constant secret was extramarital affairs. Servants often knew about secret meetings, letters, and gifts that their employers received from their lovers. They were forced to deliver these messages, arrange secret outings, and cover up lies. Their silence was bought with the fear of losing their jobs and sometimes with small, unspoken rewards. The secrets also concerned the family's financial situation. Despite the outward luxury, some families could be on the verge of bankruptcy. Servants could see their masters worrying, creditors coming, or jewelry being sold. This knowledge of the instability of the world they served was another source of their hidden power. Thus, the mansion was filled with unspoken words and hidden emotions. The servants were a living archive of these secrets, and their silence was the cornerstone of the entire system. The real dramas of the Gilded Age did not take place in full view of everyone, but in the silence of closed rooms. The power of the servants in the mansion, though implicit, was based on their absolute silence. Silence was not just a rule of etiquette, but a powerful tool that ensured their safety and the stability of the entire system. It was their main strength against their masters, whose reputation depended on their words.
Dreadful, didn't she?
The rule of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil was an unwritten law of domestic life. The servants had to behave as if they did not notice anything that happened in the house, even if they witnessed personal quarrels or reprehensible behavior. This provided the masters with comfort and confidence that their personal lives would remain private. It was this silence that made servants so valuable and irreplaceable. The mistress could confide the most intimate details of her life to her personal maid, knowing that she was obliged to keep them secret. This duty to keep secrets was part of the contract that servants entered into with the family. Any breach of silence immediately resulted in dismissal and loss of reputation in the professional community. On the other hand, silence was their protection. As long as the servant kept secrets, he was safe. If he started talking, he automatically became an enemy who could be fired, slandered, and deprived of the opportunity to find another job. Therefore, the risk was too great to break this unspoken agreement. Thus, the silence of the servants was the foundation of the luxurious and impeccable life of the Age of Splendor. It was their only power, and at the same time, their greatest responsibility. It was not just silence, but an actively supported conspiracy of silence.
Quite the advancement of communication,
Inside the golden cage of the Gilded Age, both the mistress and the servants were victims of the system, albeit for different reasons. Both groups of women bore the invisible sacrifice demanded of them by society. And it was in this similarity that the main tragedy of the era lay. The mistress's sacrifice was her emotional and personal lack of freedom. She was obliged to maintain a facade, to be impeccable, but she had no right to choice, passion, or personal happiness. Her luxury was her prison. Her life was devoted to maintaining the social status of her husband and family, and she was often unhappy in her marriage and lonely in her huge rooms. The sacrifice of the servant was in her physical labor and complete lack of personal life. Her time, energy, and health were entirely devoted to serving the happiness of others. She lived in inhuman conditions and had no guarantees for the future except her own ability to work. Her sacrifice was in sweat, fatigue, and constant fear. Despite the enormous difference in their social status, both the mistress and the servants were tied to the house. One by her status and duties, the other by her work and the need to earn a living. Both were confined within the architectural framework of the mansion, which dictated how they should live, where they should be, and what they should feel. Thus, the mansion of the Age of Splendor was not just a house, but a complex social mechanism that demanded invisible sacrifices from everyone who lived in it. Behind every luxurious wall lay someone's pain, and this house was a place not only of splendor, but also of deep human tragedy. We have taken a journey into the invisible corridors of the mansions of the Age of Splendor, where behind the gold and silk lay a complex system of social control and human drama. We have seen how architecture became an instrument of division, and silence and invisibility became the main rules of life. The main tragedy of this era was that even the highest status did not guarantee freedom and happiness. Both servants and mistresses were trapped in a system that demanded constant sacrifice from them. In the end, the price of luxury was paid not with gold, but with years of hard labor, suppressed emotions, and broken destinies. What would you most like to see in our next videos? Perhaps the lives of the famous owners of these mansions, or the stories of those who managed to escape the cycle of servitude. Share your suggestions in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel so that we can continue our journey through the hidden side of great eras.